How do you feel about your future class meetings? Do you have a solid structure to just begin them? You'll need to make some adjustments as you go to adapt to your students' disposition, your own comfort level, and so many other things. Just know that it's absolutely normal and healthy to make continuous adjustments. It means that you're being sensitive and aware of the little and sometimes big people in front of you and respecting their needs. Yours also. And those of you who already have class meetings, have you considered different elements to include in them? All right, so now that we've delved into the magic of class meetings, and I really do consider them magic because magic happens, let's continue filling up your soul with more knowledge. We're going to continue with 2 more common triggers so you have activities to counteract them in your back pocket, and in this way you'll keep your affective domain really strong and healthy. Ready? Let's go. This trigger is impatience. It can be impatience for the time it takes to learn something or the way information is presented. We're going to address learning styles later on. So right now, why don't we focus on impatience with regard to how fast we learn something. In this instant gratification world, we're saturated with messages about how quickly we can become successful, the importance of instantly gaining followers on social media, the focus of countdowns that encourage someone to buy a product fast or they lose a discounted price, etc., etc., etc. Rush, 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 rush. Learning is different. Some of us have a natural tendency to learn music quickly, or sports more naturally, or process mathematical functions more fluidly. We all have our strengths, and everything else might take more time. But instead of getting impatient with ourselves, or with our classmates, with our curriculums, with our teachers, we would do very well to be as transparent as possible. The more transparent we, the teachers, are with our students, the more understanding they become about themselves and those around them, and the more patient they become with the whole process. Sounds like a valuable formula. It is. So how do we embed transparency in the learning environment? Sounds really good, but what exactly do we do? Well, let's take language learning as an example. It's a great place to focus on because phenomenon-based learning projects are usually often presented in a classroom language that's not the majority language of the school or community. In other words, students are learning content largely in a language that's not their home language. So what do? We start with images. Visuals, people. Visuals is where the magic is. Most of the time we think our learning is going to be a straight line from the first day knowing nothing to mastering a skill within a few months. The reality is much different. The mind assimilates knowledge in different ways, in different rhythms, sometimes going back to the starting point, jumping ahead, needing review, and sometimes shooting forward again. Our impatience, our students' impatience, comes from not understanding that it's completely natural and human to have these false starts and need to take a lot of detours. So in these cases, impatience is a very normal part of language learning, especially if we don't understand normal language acquisition. What can we do to instill patience in our students? Well, what we can really do is be specific and explain to them that in the best of circumstances, we all need approximately 13,797 hours to acquire language. In general, it's how long it took us to learn our home language. Compare that to the usual 3 to 4 hours a week in the classroom language at school. So how could we possibly expect ourselves to become fluent in a few months or even a year with comparatively so little time? Let's go into this a little more. During the first 7 years of life, we learn the basic structure of our home language. We learn it through play, through mealtime, shopping, spending time in a car, walking with the family. We may not realize that we're actually learning our language because it's so holistic and organic. But language doesn't just appear in our minds. It's a progressive growth. So in general, this is how most humans learn. At 1 month, babies can distinguish between different speech sounds. At 6 months, they begin babbling, producing speech sounds, or can produce sign language. At 12 to 18 months, the average vocabulary is about 50 words. They have holla phrases, one-word sentences, and if you are around children, you know how powerful they are. From 3 to 5 years, their sign language or their speech is refined, and it resembles adult language. And at 7 years, it's fully formed. Generally, children have spent roughly 6 years and 4 months acquiring the language structure and vocabulary for their home language. Again, 13,797 hours. So strengthening the affective domain in this regard is often as simple as explaining this dynamic to your students. Once they understand that their learning speed is very normal, or even faster than normal, their impatience usually diminishes and learning goes back to being fluid. The sixth trigger that can weaken the affective domain is stubbornness. Even at very young ages, our minds know how we learn most easily and we gravitate towards those styles. In preschool, students usually have opportunities every single day to learn in so many different ways, by moving, speaking, singing, dancing, touching, drawing. The further advanced we are in school, the narrower and more limited our learning style choices are. So even at 7 years old, most of the learning is presented through listening to the teacher, reading, and writing. This is obviously ideal for linguistic learners, but not so welcome for learners who need to speak, move, touch, and manipulate things. So this leaves many students resenting the time spent in the classroom because they feel invisible and they probably don't know how to verbalize their reticence towards completing tasks because their learning style is not being honored. So they become stubborn and don't cooperate either in body or mind, or both. A solution? Rehearse this little ditty with me. Different minds, different learning styles, different scaffolds. Scaffolding, decoding, higher order thinking questions, songs, puzzles, movement, plays, anything to see how you can encourage all of your students to learn. You'll find a warehouse of scaffolds at scaffoldingmagic.com that target different ways to present information. For instance, through a taboo game, through a multi-sensory card game, by inferencing information with learning wheels, by combining art and linguistics, with higher and lower order questions that encourage a consideration of core beliefs. You are going to see the stubbornness of your students melt away once you start using scaffolding. And to start off, well, you can use the cipher wheel scaffold in the folder with other bonus materials, so you can use it tomorrow if you want. So those are 3 more common emotional triggers that block learning and weaken the affective domain. And now you have 3 more techniques to mitigate those triggers and strengthen the affective domain. Are you quivering with excitement? All right, but just as before, now is the time to go to the Lesson 3 folder and download the activity and the formative assessment for this lesson to see how much you've assimilated and learned through higher order thinking. And remember, you can adapt all of these strategies to your phenomenon-based learning projects. When you've finished, we'll continue ahead with the last of the 9 common emotional triggers and how we can counteract them, the most important part. See you soon in Lesson 4.